Lucien Moreau stepped carefully along the narrow alley beside Lise Dumas's photography studio, the uneven cobblestones muffling his footsteps as the soft murmur of Paris life drifted faintly from Rue Saint-Lazare. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and faint traces of chemicals, remnants of the studio's work. His eyes, sharp and calculating, flicked repeatedly to the cracked window pane above the door, where the faintest glimmer of reflected light caught his attention. He crouched down, angling his gaze just so, tracing the path of the stray rays as they bounced off the glass, creating distortions that seemed almost deliberate. The subtle play of light and shadow was more than mere happenstance. Lucien sensed the killer's hand in these visual riddles. He rose slowly, dusting off his trousers, and turned toward the studio entrance. Inside, Lise was already at work, adjusting the position of a vintage camera perched precariously on a tripod. Her dark hair was pinned back tightly, emphasizing the sharp lines of her face, which was set with a mixture of concentration and guarded resolve. As Lucien entered, the scent of developing chemicals wrapped around them like a ghost, a reminder of the ephemeral nature of the images they sought to understand. The angles Lise began without preamble, her voice low yet steady, are everything. A slight shift in perspective can hide 1,000 truths or reveal them. She moved with practiced grace, repositioning a lamp to cast a softer glow over a cluster of prints spread across the worktable. See here. The shadows fall just so, but the reflection in the mirror behind the subject is impossible. Lucien leaned in, eyes narrowing as he studied the photograph. There, almost hidden in the murky depths of the background, a faint silhouette lingered, an image that should not have been captured, a ghost in the frame. It's as if the killer wants us to see, yet not see, he murmured, the detective's mind racing to unravel the implications. Lise nodded, biting her lip. The reflections are manipulated, but not by accident. The killer uses mirrors, angles, and light to create illusions. It's a calculated deception designed to unsettle and mislead. The room seemed to close in around them, the air thick with tension as they pored over more prints, each revealing subtle inconsistencies, shadows that moved unnaturally, reflections that contradicted the scene, faces half hidden in the interplay of light. Lucien's habitual cigarette remained unlit in his hand, forgotten in the intensity of the moment. These details. They were not just technical, Lucien said, his voice low and measured. They were psychological. The killer is playing a game, using the medium itself as a weapon. Lise's eyes flickered with something unspoken, a mixture of fear and determination. And we're the only ones who see it. The detective paced the studio, retracing the angles of the photographs, mentally reconstructing the scenes. Every reflection, every shadow, was a piece of a complex puzzle. Outside, the city's distant sounds faded into a muted backdrop, as if Paris itself was holding its breath. Later, as dusk gave way to night, Lucien and Lise stepped outside. The street lamps cast long, wavering shadows across the pavement, their golden light mingling with the encroaching darkness. Lucien's gaze lifted to the shuttered windows above, contemplating the secrets they might still conceal. "You've been meticulous," he said quietly, breaking the silence. "Your expertise is invaluable." Lise offered a faint, almost reluctant smile. "I want the truth as much as you do." The detective nodded, feeling a rare flicker of hope. But beneath that hope lay the persistent chill of uncertainty. The shadows on Rue Saint-Lazare were deepening, and the killer's game was far from over. As they parted ways for the evening, Lucien's thoughts swirled with the implications of their discoveries. The manipulation of light and reflection was no mere trick, it was a carefully crafted signature, a mask hiding a darker truth. And somewhere within that darkness, the killer waited, watching, ready to strike again. The night settled heavily over Paris, the city's heartbeat steady but shadowed. Lucien lit his cigarette at last, the flame briefly illuminating his sharp features as he prepared for the next step in a case, that was proving to be as elusive as the ghosts in the photographs. But one question remained burning in his mind. How far would the killer go to keep their secrets hidden in the shifting play of light and shadow? The answer, Lucien knew, would come only if he could outwit the illusions and confront the hidden angles that had so far kept the truth beyond reach. And so, with renewed resolve, he plunged deeper into the labyrinth of deception, where every reflection was a riddle, and every shadow a potential clue. The game was on, and the stakes had never been higher. The morning light filtered weakly through the grimy windows of the police bureau near Rue Saint-Lazare, casting long, pale shadows over the cluttered desks and filing cabinets. Lucien Moreau sat rigidly in a stiff wooden chair opposite Père Gautier, the official liaison assigned to the investigation. The air was thick with stale smoke and the faint odor of damp paper, an atmosphere as oppressive as the unspoken tension between the two men. Gautier folded his hands neatly on the desk, his sharp eyes fixed on Lucien with a mixture of impatience and calculation. "Detective Moreau," he began, voice clipped and formal, "I understand your concerns, but the police have protocols. We cannot simply chase every shadow or whimsy of interpretation. We must work with concrete evidence." Lucien's jaw tightened. "These photographs are not mere whimsy, Gautier. They're clues, manipulated images that point to something more sinister. Ignoring them will only delay justice." Gautier's lips pressed into a thin line. "The department is stretched thin. We have to prioritize. Your unconventional methods are causing unnecessary alarm." The words stung. Lucien could feel the sharp edge of bureaucratic resistance closing in. He had long since learned that the pursuit of truth often ran up against walls of procedure and skepticism. Yet this case was different. He could feel it in the marrow of his bones. "I'm not here to cause alarm," Lucien said quietly. "I'm here to solve a mystery that nobody else dares to unravel." The room fell silent save for the incessant ticking of a worn clock on the wall. Outside, the muffled sounds of the awakening city street vendors calling. The distant clatter of tram wheels seeped in through a cracked window. Frustrated but undeterred, Lucien left the bureau and made his way to a small cafe not far from the station. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the soft murmur of early patrons. Sophie Moreau sat at a corner table, her delicate hands wrapped around a steaming cup. "You look like you've been through a storm," she said gently, eyes full of concern. Lucien sank into the chair opposite her, the wariness momentarily softening. "The police want to box me in, Sophie. They don't see what I see in these photographs." She reached across the table, a reassuring touch against his restless fingers. "You've always had the strength to see beyond what's apparent. Don't lose that now." Her words, simple and sincere, grounded him. The weight of his personal losses and the growing darkness of the case pressed heavily, but Sophie's presence was a beacon in the fog. Later that afternoon, Lucien returned to Liz's studio, the space alive with the subtle dance of light and shadow through half-drawn curtains. The faint smell of photographic chemicals lingered, a reminder of the studio's dual role as a place of creation and deception. Liz adjusted a lamp, her sharp eyes narrowing as she studied a new set of images spread meticulously across the table. "Look here," she said softly, pointing to a faint double exposure that blurred the edges of a figure. This was no accident. Someone is deliberately layering images to distort reality. Lucien leaned in, the fine details sharpening in his mind. This manipulation, it's a message, a signature. But whose and why? Their collaboration was a fragile alliance forged in the shadows of doubt and trust. As they pieced together the visual riddles, the studio became a crucible for revelations, where every flicker of light revealed new facets of the mystery. As dusk fell over Rue Saint-Lazare, Lucien stepped onto the cobblestone street outside, the city's ambient hum wrapping around him like a shroud. A cigarette glowed faintly between his fingers, smoke curling upward into the cool evening air. The shadows lengthened, mirroring the growing unease in his heart. He inhaled deeply, the bitter smoke mingling with the memories that haunted him, the loss of his wife, the fragile line between truth and illusion. Each step echoed unanswered questions, each breath a silent vow to see this case through, no matter the cost. The flickers of truth teased him relentlessly, elusive and mocking. Yet, beneath the frustration and fatigue, a stubborn flame of hope burned bright, urging him onward through the labyrinth of light and deception that defined the shadows on Rue Saint-Lazare. And so, with the night settling like a velvet curtain over the city, Lucien prepared to chase the elusive answers that danced just beyond the reach of the lens, knowing that every revelation would bring him closer to the heart of darkness and to the fragile light of justice. The heavy wooden door creaked softly as Lucien Moreau pushed it open, stepping into the dim sanctuary of Lise Dumas' photography studio. A faint scent of aged wood mingled with the sharp tang of chemicals fixer and developer long since dried but never quite forgotten. Dust motes floated lazily in the shafts of late afternoon light that pierced the high windows, casting long, slender beams that fractured the air like shards of glass. Each particle seemed suspended in time, caught between shadow and illumination, much like the secrets Lucien sought. Lise stood near a cluttered wooden desk, her posture rigid yet graceful. The dark hair pinned back from her face revealed sharp features, a pale complexion, and eyes that flickered with a cautious intelligence. She was dressed modestly, the fabric of her blouse soft but unadorned, reflecting a quiet elegance. The muted tones of the studio enveloped her like a protective shroud. "I suppose you want to know about my family," she said softly without looking up, her voice barely above a whisper but steady. "And my brother." Lucien nodded, settling into a worn chair opposite her. He noted her hands slender, with faint stains of developer embedded beneath the nails, twisting a delicate silver ring. "Please, Lise. Anything you can tell me might help." She hesitated, gazing toward a faded photograph on the wall, a portrait of a young man with an impish smile and eyes full of life. Jean was different. Artistic, she began, her voice thickening. "Our family has always lived and breathed art. Mother was a painter, father a sculptor. Jean followed in their footsteps, but photography was his true passion." The studio around them seemed to hold its breath, the clutter of cameras, lenses, and aged prints whispering of stories untold. Lucien's eyes scanned the room, noticing the interplay of light and shadow cast by the gathering dusk. How the angles bent reality, much like the photographs at the heart of the mystery. "Jean died 2 years ago," Lise continued, voice faltering. "A fall from the Pont de l'Alma. The police ruled it an accident, but I never believed it. There were things left unsaid, people who should have been held accountable." Lucien absorbed the weight of her words, the tremor beneath her composed exterior. "Do you think his death is connected to these photographs?" She met his gaze, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. "I fear it is." For a long moment, silence filled the space, broken only by the faint ticking of a clock and the distant rumble of trains from Rue Saint-Lazare. The studio, once just a place of work, now felt like a crucible where past grief and present danger melded. Lucien rose and approached a board pinned with an array of photographs, some crisp, others blurred, all tinged with an unsettling quality. The images seemed to shift as the light moved, shadows bending and twisting, reflections fracturing faces and places into something unrecognizable. He traced a finger along the edges, searching for patterns, clues hidden in the interplay of light and dark. "These photographs," he murmured, "they were more than pictures. They were puzzles, fragments of a story that someone wants to hide." Lise nodded, stepping closer, and the studio itself is part of that story. The way the light falls, the angles we use, it's all a language, one that can reveal or conceal. Their eyes met, a fragile trust blossoming amid the shadows. For the first time since the investigation began, Lucien sensed that Lise was not merely a witness, but a partner, someone who understood the stakes as deeply as he did. "We must be careful," she said quietly. "There are forces at work here that thrive in darkness, but together, perhaps we can bring light." The distant whistle of a train echoed through the streets below, a reminder of the bustling world beyond the studio's walls. Yet inside, time seemed suspended between shadow and light, grief and hope, deception and truth. Lucien inhaled deeply, the familiar weight of his cigarette between his fingers, and knew the path ahead would be fraught with peril. But with lies beside him, the fractured reflections of the past might finally begin to coalesce into clarity. As evening deepened, the studio's secrets whispered in the silence, daring them to listen. The room was silent but for the distant hum of Paris's nocturnal rhythm, a soft, ever-present backdrop to Lucien Moreau's solitary vigil. He sat at his small desk, shadows cast long and wavering by the flicker of a single candle. The photograph before him, a delicate sepia image of a smiling woman with gentle eyes, was both a comfort and a wound. His wife, gone these many years, yet her presence lingered, a ghost in the quiet corners of his mind. Lucien reached out, fingertips grazing the worn edges of the photo, and the smoke from his cigarette curled upward, twisting like the memories that refused to settle. The night had a way of distorting time, of blurring the lines between past and present. His thoughts drifted unbidden to the accident, the screech of tires, the shattering glass, the cold stillness that followed. It was a memory etched with pain, yet now it seemed as elusive as the faces in the photographs he was chasing. How much of what he recalled was truth, and how much was shaped by grief and longing? Morning brought no relief. At the photographer's studio near Rue Saint-Lazare, Lise Dumas awaited, her expression guarded but resolute. The studio was a cluttered sanctuary of light and shadow, filled with the scent of chemicals and the faint scratch of pencil on paper. Lucien laid out the conflicting witness statements on the desk, their inked words stark under the harsh lamp. "These accounts don't line up," Lucien murmured, his brows knitted in concentration. One places the victim on the platform at 8:15. The other says she was already inside the studio. But the photographs, they say something else entirely. Liz's eyes flickered with unease. "People's memories aren't always reliable, Monsieur Moreau, especially under stress." He nodded, but the doubt gnawed at him. If witnesses could be mistaken, could his own memories be trusted? The photographs themselves seemed to play tricks, light bending to conceal more than it revealed. Later, in the warmth of a quiet cafe, Lucien met with Sophie, his sister. The gentle clink of coffee cups and the murmur of distant conversations created a cocoon of calm. Sophie's presence was a balm to his frayed nerves. "You were carrying too much alone," she said softly, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "The past doesn't have to define you." Lucien's gaze dropped to the swirling steam, "But it shapes how I see everything. Even this case. I'm beginning to wonder if what I remember is as manipulated as those photographs." Her eyes held a quiet understanding. "Then perhaps it's time to let others in, to share the burden." Back at the studio, determination sharpened Lucien's focus. He arranged mirrors and lights, trying to recreate the optical illusions that had so confounded him. The flickering reflections fractured his image again and again, a haunting metaphor for the elusive truth he sought. Each distorted visage reminded him that memory, like light, could be bent and broken. Hours slipped by unnoticed as Lucien worked, the line between investigator and haunted man blurring. He understood now that the case was not just about uncovering a killer, but wrestling with the fragile nature of perception itself. And in that wrestling, he found a sliver of hope, that even amidst distortion, the truth was still waiting to be found. As night deepened, Lucien paused and looked around the studio, the shadows settling like a cloak. The photographs on the walls seemed to watch him, silent witnesses to a story still unfolding. He lit another cigarette, the glow briefly illuminating his determined, wary face. The path ahead was uncertain, but he would follow it wherever it led through shadows and light, memory and deception until the final image came into focus. But as the smoke curled and the city hummed outside, one thought lingered, unspoken and uneasy. How many memories could be trusted when even the light itself could lie? The question hung in the air, as elusive and haunting as the shadows on Rue Saint-Lazare. The case was far from over, and so was the fight for truth. The café was alive with the low hum of conversation, the clatter of cups, and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Henry Lefebvre, seated behind the counter, wiped a glass with a linen cloth, glancing up as the bell above the door jingled softly. Detective Lucien Moreau stepped inside, his grey eyes scanning the familiar faces that filled the small Parisian café near Rue Saint-Lazare. It was early evening, and the fading light outside cast long shadows through the windows, mingling with the warm glow of gas lamps inside. Lucien's coat was damp from the mist that had settled over the city, droplets clinging to the fabric as he moved toward the counter. Henry greeted him with a smile, his bushy mustache twitching as he spoke in a hushed tone. Detective Moreau, just in time. I was hoping to catch you before closing. There's been unsettling talk around the neighborhood. Lucien nodded, settling onto a worn wooden stool. I'm all ears, Henry. What have you heard? Henry leaned in, lowering his voice despite the emptying room. There's a man, a shadow they say, lurking near the station. Folks have seen him pacing the alleys, watching. No one knows who he is, but his presence has stirred unease. Even the usual night owls keep their distance. The detective's gaze sharpened. Have you seen him yourself? Once, from the kitchen window, a tall man, gaunt, with piercing eyes that seem to cut through the fog. He disappears when approached. Folks say he's connected to the strange photographs, those that show faces that never posed. Lucien frowned, the puzzle pieces shifting in his mind. Thank you, Henry. Your information is invaluable. If you hear or see anything else, you will let me know. Of course, Lucien, we all want peace restored. Later, as Lucien stepped back into the damp night, the mist wrapped around him like a shroud. The gas lamps flickered, casting eerie patterns on the cobblestones. He moved deliberately toward the alleys Henry had described, senses alert for any sign of the mysterious figure. A sudden rustle behind a stack of crates made him halt. Heart pounding, Lucien peered into the gloom. A slender shadow slipped away, melting into the darkness with a speed that belied human agility. He pursued briefly but lost the figure in the labyrinth of narrow streets. Returning to the relative safety of Liza's studio, Lucien found her seated amidst her photographic equipment, the soft lamplight bathing her face in a warm glow. The neighborhood is on edge, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Even my regular clients hesitate to come by. Lucien regarded her carefully. Henry mentioned a shadowy man near the station. Does that fit with anything you've noticed? Les nodded slowly. There's something more than fear in the air. I'm beginning to trust you, Lucien. Perhaps together we can unravel the truth that hides in these shadows. The evening deepened, punctuated by moments of silence and the quiet click of camera shutters as Liza examined her latest prints. Their partnership, tentative but growing, was a fragile beacon amidst the encroaching darkness. Back at the café the following day, Henry watched Lucien with a mixture of hope and concern. The detective's determination was evident as he prepared to follow fresh leads, the weight of the investigation pressing upon him. Normalcy thrived inside those walls, but outside, the shadows lengthened and the whispers grew louder. In this uneasy balance, Lucien knew the chase was only beginning. The mysterious figure, the manipulated photographs, and the string of deaths were intertwined in a web of secrets waiting to be unraveled. Every whisper, every shadow, every flicker of light brought him closer to a truth that could shatter the fragile peace of Rue Saint-Lazare once and for all. As Lucien extinguished his cigarette and stared out into the night, the question lingered in the chill air. Who was watching? And what dark reflections lay hidden just beyond the glow of the street lamps? The answer, he feared, would demand everything he had to give and perhaps more.